Welcome to Minnesota Zen Meditation Center, and happy April Fool's Day. That was my prank. You like it? I didn't have to do that. My name is Randy Wedin, and I am a lay teacher here. And I don't know if you guys at home can see me. Is there a little picture of me? Am I waving around there? Here we go. Okay, yeah, you guys can see me. Okay, great. So the topic for this evening's talk, as you can see on the big screen, is why Zen is Buddhism with jokes. So I'm going to talk about the role of humor in Zen, which reminds me. Did you hear about the new Buddhist vacuum cleaner? It comes with no attachments. So, you can groan, it's okay. As I was doing research for this talk, I came across several websites on the internet that included a lot of different jokes, Buddhist-related jokes, and some are pretty simple, like that one. And some are more complex and require, an understanding of Buddhist concepts. And I'm going to try to give you some jokes of both types. But I'm also going to talk about why Zen, as compared to other schools of Buddhism, is the one that has more humor in it, has a reputation for the use of humor. And I'm going to tell you about a couple of individuals that exemplified this. Now, you don't have to have a sense of humor to get involved in Zen. We don't ask you at the front door if you have a sense of humor. But did you hear about the recruitment sign posted outside of one Zen monastery? It said, "Inquire within." Speaking of Zen monasteries, I came across an absolutely true story online about a Zen monastery. This new student, he joins a monastery and he takes a vow of silence, but he's allowed 2 words a year. So first year is really rough. He does 14-hour days. He's doing zazen. He's doing work practice. He's eating just rice. He's sleeping on a wooden bed. He just has one thin blanket. And finally, at the end of the year, he goes to see his teacher, the head monk, and he says, "More blankets." So another year passes, and he goes to the head monk and says, "More food." And then another year passes, and the student is he's just about headed. He's exhausted by these long days, and he goes to the head monk and says, "I'm leaving." And the head monk says, "Good. You've done nothing but complain since you got here." So I'm going to give you a little break from this history, from this comedy routine now, and tell you why Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism has this reputation for humor. And it's sort of, so here's how it came about. I'm going to go to the slideshow. My trusty assistant, Matt, tells me to do that. Okay, so here we go. Here's a map showing how Buddhism started in India, northern India, and it followed the Silk Road and moved up into China in the 1st century, the Common Era. And there it encountered Taoism and Confucianism. And it incorporated some ideas from these religions and became Chan Buddhism. And then over time, it moved into Korea and into Japan, where it's called Zen Buddhism. It moved down into Vietnam. And all these yellow areas are Mahayana Buddhism, which is kind of the big main, one of the largest chunk of Buddhism. The orange-brown areas down here is Theravada Buddhism, which is another large branch of Buddhism. And when Buddhism got into China and encountered Taoism, here are some of the concepts that it encountered. So in the Buddhism column, you'll see things that you're pretty familiar with. The Four Noble Truths, suffering, attachment, meditation, compassion and wisdom, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And I'd have to say Indian Buddhism is kind of solemn and earnest. And the Taoism, you've got a concept called Wu Wei, effortless action. Yin Yang is a big thing, which is the opposing forces, but they're also interdependent. Nature is really important, simplicity, and I've highlighted spontaneity, acting naturally, and there's a sense of playfulness and joyfulness. So the things I highlighted are things that I think have a flavor bring a flavor of humor into Zen, because here's what happens when you put them together. You've got Chan Buddhism or Zen Buddhism. And so we've got, you look down the list there, and the things that I highlighted in particular are the things that I want to talk about a little bit more, because I think they're most directly related to the humor and Zen. You've got enlightenment, sudden enlightenment. You've got koans, which are these paradoxical riddles used to provoke insight. And you've got acting spontaneously and naturally. So I guess, maybe it's time for another joke, because that was a history lesson. Now, I'm not a person who has a very large repertoire of jokes. I'm not a person that can just roll them off my tongue, because, the ones I told already, I had to find on the internet. But I did have one joke in my back pocket always about Zen Buddhism. There's one that I could always tell. So, and it goes like this. A Zen Buddhist monk walks into a pizza parlor and goes up to the person at the counter and says, "Can you please make me one with everything?" And then the monk hands a $20 bill to the person at the counter and waits for his change and waits for his change. And after a while, he's still waiting, but the person at the counter says, "Don't you know, change must come from within?" So turns out this is kind of the most well-known Buddhist joke. When I was looking for jokes on the internet, this one kept coming up again and again. Sometimes it's you're ordering a pizza, sometimes you're ordering a hot dog. Well, it turns out that this joke doesn't always get a laugh. And here's a video clip that shows that it doesn't always go as expected. This is a video clip from an Australian news program, and it features a news anchor interviewing the Dalai Lama. And there's going to be if this works, there'll be a short YouTube ad at the beginning, so you'll have to kind of live with that.
Now, as you know, I did share a gag with Dalai Lama because he was in such fine form. I decided that I would tell this gag. Now, it did prove to be not my most successful ever. Check it out. So the Dalai Lama walks into a pizza shop.
Pizza shop.
Pizza?
Pizza shop, yes.
Yeah, pizza shop. And says, "Can you make me one with everything?"
What's that? That's what it. Oh, yes.
Do you know what I mean? Can you make me one with everything.
아, theoretically possible.
Oh, I knew that wouldn't work.
He laughed more at the fact that it didn't work.
Didn't know what pizza was. It's always going to fall down there, isn't it?
You know that a joke's in trouble if you've got a translator off to the side every couple of words.
Anyway, I felt better having spoken to him, and I think everyone who talks to him does.
Oh.
With everything. Because it's a pizza. And he's the
You should have said the lot. One with the lot.
One with the
No.
lot.
No.
Maybe it was a hamburger.
Okay, so when I was looking for jokes on the internet, I also found some cartoons. And if you ever want to, waste some time, that's a good rabbit hole to go down. Just, type in, go to Google and type in Buddhist cartoons. And so I found a couple about mindfulness. Here's one. So the head monk is he's got a megaphone. He says to the other monks, "What do we want?" And they reply, "Mindfulness." "When do we want it?" "Now." So the definition of mindfulness is, being in the now without judgment. So that's the reason that's supposed to be funny. I had to explain it. If you have to explain a joke, this is getting at the more advanced level of Buddhism. Here's another one. I'll try another cartoon about mindfulness. But this one is a type of mindfulness we don't teach here much at the Zen Center. So you may not get this one. This is a type of mindfulness called absent mindfulness. So you got this slacker standing next to his partner, and he's holding a bag of chips, and he says, he confesses, I totally forgot we were going to be in the moment together. So now it's time to go back, get serious again for a little bit. So I mentioned, Buddhism, Zen is Buddhism with jokes. So let me try to make the case for that a little bit. Try to draw some parallels. And let's start with the koans, the use of koans in Buddhism, in Zen. Koans are these paradoxical riddles that they seem nonsensical, but they're used as teaching tools to sort of break down conventional thought and lead to some sort of intuitive understanding. And initially, they can be quite confusing and frustrating. But the goal isn't to find a logical answer, but to gain some sort of flash of insight that transcends your intellect. And both Soto and Rinzai Zen use koans. We're a Soto Zen center. The Rinzai Zen, they tend to use it in a more formal and structured way. Rinzai students are expected to contemplate a koan during meditation, and then demonstrate their understanding of that koan to their teacher. And they have to keep going back to their teacher until their teacher says, "Yeah, I think you've got it." And that may take weeks or months. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of koans just so you get the idea. The first koan that Rinzai students are often given is just called mu. And mu, M-U, is the Chinese word for no, just no. So here's that koan. A student asked Joshu, his teacher, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" And Joshu replied, "Mu." And that's the koan. And so the student's supposed to go away and contemplate that, and can take weeks or months to kind of get that into your bones and figure out what it's all about. Here's another, that's the Mu koan. Here's another well-known koan that features Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the first Zen patriarch that is said to have brought Zen from India into China. The student asked Zhaju, his teacher, why did Bodhidharma come from the West? And Zhaju replied, the oak tree in the garden. So let me repeat that. Why did Bodhidharma come from the West? The oak tree in the garden. So you can see these koans don't make a lot of sense right off the bat. But if a student eventually solves the koan, you might get this aha moment, which is accompanied by a sense of lightness, maybe even laughter, and your previous thinking is kind of expanded, and that's kind of like what humor does. You might, when you hear a joke, there's a moment of confusion, and then suddenly things click into place, and you start laughing. And there's a release, kind of. So that's how one way that people often point to koans, and when they talk about humor in Zen, that there's some similarity, that they're a way of jolting the mind out of its habitual path. Another way that they talk about humor in Zen is that we're not supposed to take ourselves too seriously. And in Zen, one of the things that we emphasize is the dissolution of the self, because non-self is an idea. There's no truly an independent self, and so the idea of letting go of self-importance and just accepting the present moment is very important in Zen, and humor can serve that same purpose of just accepting the everyday absurdities in life and just let go of rigid thinking and expectations. So that's the end of your second lecture. And time for a few more jokes. Now this is, we're moving into the advanced level of jokes. And this requires a little bit more Buddhist knowledge and of concepts. And maybe I'll have to explain them, and that means I've failed. But, I just said, I'm not supposed to take myself too seriously, so that's okay. I'll be like that guy in the video clip I showed you. What happens when a Buddhist becomes totally absorbed with the computer he's working with? He enters nerdvana. Anyone want to groan? Okay, here's one. Maybe someone can answer this question. Does a cow have Buddha nature? Good. Good. How many Zen students does it take to change a light bulb? 2. 1 to change the light bulb and 1 not to change the light bulb. How many Zen students does it take to change the light bulb? 3. 1 to change the light bulb, 1 to not change the light bulb, and 1 to both change the light bulb and not change the light bulb. How many Zen students does it take to change a light bulb?
4.
I had to cut that out. That's complicated. That would require too much talking, but there is an answer that requires 4, but I'm going to skip that. That's really advanced. It involves something called the tetralemma. You can talk to me afterwards about that. I cut that out of the talk. But this is another one. How many Zen students does it take to change a light bulb? The oak tree in the garden. 2 weeks ago, here in the Zendo, we had a talk from Tenmyo Dojima. Did any of you attend it? She was the Japanese nun that was staying with us for a short period of time. It was a wonderful talk. And I actually had the additional opportunity to take her out for lunch one day. And at lunch, I mentioned I was going to be giving a talk about humor in Zen, and I asked her if she had any thoughts about the topic. And she told me that she had an experience a couple of years ago when she was touring in Europe. She was visiting some Zen centers throughout Europe. And when she was in Amsterdam at the Zen center, they had a workshop led by a clown. And I realized as she was talking about it that this was probably led by Mr. Yoo-hoo, who I had just been learning about. This is a guy, Mr. Yoo-hoo, who's been going around the world giving clown workshops at Zen centers for a number of years. And one of his workshops is called lightfulness training. Sort of the play on the word lightfulness, like mindfulness. And this is some pictures taken from his website, but I think this is the training that Tenmyo attended, because she talked to me about playing with balloons. They were kind of learning how to do meditation walking, but with balloons, you know, and acting spontaneously. And she said that it was, there was a lot of emphasis on nonverbal communication, because that's really big in the clown world, you know, just reacting spontaneously to whatever's in front of you. So the way that this guy, Mr. Yoo-hoo, got involved in clown and Zen together is that he was, this guy in this picture out there on the right, Bernie Glassman, he's the person on the left of that picture, is a Zen teacher. And he, this is 25 years ago, Bernie Glassman thought his Zen students were too serious. And so he sought out a clown that would teach him some clown techniques. And he got hooked up with Moshe Cohen, Mr. Yoo-hoo, and together they developed some workshops. And now Moshe Cohen goes on and does these workshops on his own. So I started learning a little bit more about Bernie Glassman, and I found out he's a pretty interesting guy. In this picture, he's got a clown nose, a little red nose on it. You can't, it's in black and white, but he has got a red clown nose on. And he used to carry one in his pocket. And sometimes he'd put it on during a Dharma talk. Or if he was talking to someone and they were getting a little bit too intellectual, he'd take it out of his pocket and stick it on his nose. But he was also a real serious guy. And he founded something called the Zen Peacemakers Order. And they did things like they held street retreats in New York City, where when they had a sesshin, they would sleep at they would sleep overnight at with the street people. They would eat with the street people, you know, and so he was really involved in social engagement with his community. And then he also held annual retreats at the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp. And these sorts of activities now are being continued by the Zen Peacemakers International, which has become an international organization. He's also known for publishing a book called The Dude and the Zen Master. And there's a picture here on the left of the book, The Dude and the Zen Master, published with Jeff Bridges and Bernie Glassman. And this was on the New York Times bestseller list about 20 years ago. And the way that this came about is that, any of you heard of the movie The Big Lebowski? Okay, it was a movie made by the Coen brothers The picture on the right there is Jeff Bridges, the main character, in his role as Jeffrey Lebowski. And that became kind of a cult classic. And Jeff Bridges and Bernie Glassman started hearing that people were saying, this Big Lebowski is a Zen movie. It's got a lot of Zen themes in it. Well, it turned out the movie hadn't really been created for that purpose. They weren't injected into the movie originally, even though Jeff Bridges was a Zen student. He knew a lot about Zen. So they got together and they started talking about, well, what's so Zen about it? And they became good friends. And one way it's got the Zen themes in it is the main character's, one of his favorite phrases is the dude abides. And he just takes life as it happens, just lives in the moment, accepts what's happening, goes with the flow. And that's seen as being very similar to the concept of non-attachment, equanimity, finding joy in simple pleasures. So that's, if you watch the movie, you'll get to, with putting on sort of Zen glasses, you'll see why people thought it was a Zen movie. The book talks about Zen, but it talks about acting and life. It's a pretty interesting book. So Bernie Glassman died in 2018 at the age of 79. So I think I have time to tell you about one more person. And that person is Brad Warner. And he's alive and writing books and doing podcasts. He started learning about Zen when he was in college in Ohio. He was also played in a punk rock band then. He continued to play in a punk rock band. He played bass in the 1980s and early 1990s. And then when he discovered he couldn't make enough money to support himself, he moved to Japan because he was always interested in Japan. He's interested in Zen. And he taught English for a couple of years there. And then he got a job because he had a real passion for Godzilla movies. He got a job doing marketing for a company that made Godzilla movies. And he stayed there another 7 or 8 years in this job. But he found, throughout that time, he continued to study Zen. He found a teacher, Nishijama Roshi, and he joined an English-speaking Sangha and studied Zen seriously and eventually got transmission from Nishijama to become an independent teacher. So then he moved back to the US in 2004 and started his own Sangha, started doing podcasts and writing books. His podcast is called Hardcore Zen. His website is hardcorezen.info. His first book was called Hardcore Zen, Punk Rock, Monster Movies, and the Truth About Reality. And the picture I have here is the cover of one of his books about Dogen. Dogen is the 13th century monk that was considered the founder of our Soto Zen school. And so he's kind of a revered figure in Soto Zen. And he wrote a book. His most famous book is called the Shobo Genzo. It's a collection of a lot of his writings. This translation is books 2, 3, and 4 of one of his translations. So it's a lot of writing, right, Matt? Matt studied this extensively, and it's really dense stuff. We just finished a 10-week class here at the Zen Center on Dogen, and there were 40 students that took it and stuck with it. because it's, it's really important stuff, but it is very challenging. And I found the textbook, the book that we used to read, pretty hard to get through. The discussions were good. But I did cheat a little bit and read occasionally from Brad Warner's books, where he paraphrased this stuff and in his own style. So I'm going to give you a flavor of his own style, which is quite refreshing. Here's an example of what a scholar says. I just picked the passage out of a scholar's translation of one little important part of one little important chapter. It's called the fascicle. This one is time being, which is one of the most famous little areas of trying to understand what Dogen thinks about time. So I'll just read this. Yet an ordinary person who does not understand Buddha Dharma may hear the words time being this way. For a while, I was 3 heads and 8 arms. For a while, I was an 8 or 16-foot body. This is like having crossed over rivers and climbed mountains. Even though the mountains and rivers still exist, I have already passed them and now reside in the jeweled palace and vermilion tower. Those mountains and rivers are as distant from me as heaven is from earth. So that's just one paragraph from a long section. Well, here's what Brad Warner said, his translation. Yet regular people think, sometimes I'm pissed off like a 3-headed demon, but sometimes I get real chill like a 16-foot golden Buddha. It's sort of like crossing the street on the way to the convenience store to get some chips and brews. The street and the convenience store still exist, but now I'm kicking back in front of the TV with my bag of Doritos and a can of arrogant bastard ale. So it's a little more fun to read, but but Matt, do you think he captures the point?
It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, if you look at it closely, it says the very same thing. So that's what got me through the class. So we have Brad Warner's books in the library downstairs. I gave you the name of his podcast, Hardcore Zen. So you might want to check that out if you want a refreshing view of Zen Buddhism. So if I had more time, I'd tell you about some other interesting people that illustrate humor in Zen, people alive now and people in the past, but I don't have any more time. But I do have time to leave one final thing with you to kind of let you think about. I talked about how koans and jokes are kind of similar. So here's one for you to ponder. Is this a koan or a cartoon? So you think about that one, and you can give me the answer during our discussion period, because it's time for us to move into the discussion period with your comments, questions, jokes, whatever, or answers to this puzzle. The floor is open. And folks that are online, you can just shout out.
Randy, another Zen teaching was, I think sometimes we see the world like we're sitting at the bottom of a well, right? And we're like looking up and we just see part of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I was growing up, a lot of kids would fall into wells. You know, it just seems like it's in the news all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you hear about the old guy that fell into the well?
No, tell me about him.
Do you know why the old guy fell into the well?
No.
Well, he couldn't see that well.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you.
There's a cartoon posted downstairs, I think a long time ago. It was just a row of monks, Zen monks, you know, like a long row of like 15 Zen monks sitting there totally quiet with good posture. But one of them had pulled out a cell phone and he was saying, "This isn't working at all." I thought it was funny. Because we have those moments, you know.
Hey, Randy.
Yeah, go ahead.
As long as we're doing jokes, I'm going to tell you my favorite joke. My favorite.
All right, great.
So in ancient India, there was a monk walking up on a path to get to a distant monastery, and he comes across a river. He can't seem to find a way to get across it. So he begins walking down the river, and he sees a monk on the other side walking in the other direction and waves his arms and goes, "Hey, hey, hey." And the other monk goes, "Oh, yeah, okay." He says, "How do I get to the other side?" And the monk on the other side goes, "What? What?" He says, How do I get to the other side?" And the monk on the other side of the river says, "You are on the other side."
Thank you, Drew. And that one, that could be a koan because there's talk in Zen about getting to the other side. That's kind of, that's a big deal.